Hi everyone, Sid here, back in the bathroom. Before I get into today's topic, I'm going to do a bit of housekeeping. And for those of you who don't care and want to go right to today's topic, you can skip to this time signature, which eventually, as I master YouTube, maybe I'll put a link here with that'll skip directly ahead. But you've been warned, and I think it's relevant because of, well, I'll get into why once I've done it. So I just want to share a few thoughts about my last video because I knew as I was shooting it that there were going to be a lot of links in it, and before uploading it I just wanted to make sure that I wouldn't forget any links. So I watched it all, and there are two things, two thoughts that jumped into my mind pretty quick. The first one was, boy, my right shoulder really is the star of this video. And fortunately for you, that's my good shoulder. And the other thought that I had was, I'm really saying a lot. And the thing is, as a member of Toastmasters, I don't know if I went into this, but I was a strong member of a strong club, and something that you hear really soon, this is a really common trick, is that you don't say you pause instead. And I was kind of surprised at how just putting myself in an unfamiliar territory of filming myself while driving had me basically forgetting the basics. And something I like to say is that mastering anything is mastering the basics. So I took this as a challenge, and I will definitely be filming other videos from the car. I think it's a nice option because sometimes I do go a week without shaving, and sometimes when I do that, I don't like filming myself when I'm shaving with a long beard, because I tend to cut myself and fuck up my face. And sometimes I do, sometimes I don't, but it's nice to have the car as an option. And one thing that, the reason why I'm getting into this housekeeping is that I think it's a double teachable moment, because if you didn't read the comments, which is most of you, one of the first commenters was Love, Life, and Anarchy, who has another YouTube channel which is 2 orders of magnitude more successful than mine. And he said, dude, get a proper mount for your phone if you're going to do it from the car. And honestly, again, I noticed how it didn't seem like a big deal when I was setting up the phone. And when I saw it, when I was watching the video, that's when it kind of jumped out, but I wasn't discouraged enough to stop myself from doing it. But when I read that, comment, I was like, okay, it's more important than I thought. So I better do this sooner than later. I'll be right back. Don't know my own strength. So the other teachable aspect, basically it's a double teachable moment in the sense that it's important to remain coachable when you want to grow a skill, and someone who has a reason for you to take his or her advice seriously gives you advice. Just fucking follow the advice and take it seriously. It's important to remain coachable. And the other thing, the reason why I don't mind going into this housekeeping right now, is that it's important to be willing to publish videos that you're not happy with, or content that you're not entirely happy with, because another comment that was made in this video is another YouTuber that I don't know, but I gave credit in the other video, but he published a link to a student who was in that classroom in Spring Valley High explaining what it was like to be in that classroom. He was there from the beginning of the incident. And had I not published that video, had I said, basically, had I not published that video, I wouldn't have gotten access to that bigger context. I mean, maybe I would have published that anyway, but having published it when I did, I got access to that broader context that much faster. And also, it's useful for, well, useful. It's interesting for people who become your fans to see your evolution, sometimes your back steps. I mean, there are videos that I published in this bathroom that I'm not that happy with. But it's really by doing something that you get the skill and become better at it. So I think that is good for the housekeeping. So today's topic, I want to talk about a challenge that I've been aware of for a while, but I just want to acknowledge it publicly because it's important, and if someone has clearer answers to it, I would really appreciate being able to solve it that much faster. Before I get into what the challenge is, I'm going to give some backstory. So I was listening to the October 17th edition of the No State Project, which is one of my favorite podcasts to listen to regularly. And I'll put a link under this video to that episode. I think Mark Stevens' work is very important. I've filmed a video of this before, and since it's on my mind, I'll put a link to that as well. But there was a caller in that edition who mentioned something, well, basically, he tried to present evidence of jurisdiction and applicability. I'll continue that in just a second. So, Mark Stevens is really keen on when someone says, hey, I can prove that the Constitution and Code are applicable to you and that the courts have jurisdiction, to let the challenger present their evidence. So this caller presented as evidence, and I'm throwing up air quotes here even though evidence is in quotes. He said that he used as an example, if Mark threw a brick through his window, that he could use the courts to prosecute him. And the sad part for me is that the caller wasn't even getting that he wasn't proving jack shit. He was basically using the same appeal to the stick that prosecutors typically do when they're challenged on whether or not they have evidence that the Constitution and Code apply to them. Or sometimes the judge jumps in and takes their burden of proof for them. But since this caller was basically going back and forth with Mark and not even getting that he wasn't getting it, my mind was kind of wandering. And I was reminded of this challenge, which I'd been aware of before, but it was an interesting thought experiment. Like, let's say that you threw a brick through my window. And let's say I could prove it beyond a reasonable doubt after the fact. Like, I have videotape of you throwing the brick through the window, and the camera somehow pans to show the brick traveling from your hand all the way through my window, and I kept the brick and I have your fingerprints on the brick. Let's say you weren't wearing gloves. Now, let's say this happened in a free society, and when I came to you and said, hey, you owe me damages for my window, and you said, you know what, fuck off, I'm not paying for your windows, bite me. What would happen? And I think that it's it's a fair question to ponder, because it's important to like, retribution or making someone whole is going to be really important. We want to make sure that we're made whole when damages are perpetrated on us, and that there's a perpetrator to make us whole. I mean, sometimes shit happens, but it's not necessarily open and shut case as to what should be done. Let's say I was in an alleyway and you jump out from behind the dumpster with a knife and you say, hand over your wallet, and I have a gun and I shoot you in the kneecaps or whatever. That's kind of straightforward. But if it's you throwing a brick through my window and I come over to you a week later, let's say that's how long it took me to find you, and you say, fuck off, I'm not paying for your window, it's not as let's say that there was force used to get money from you to pay me back for my window. It's not as straightforward as the situation where you're jumping out from behind a dumpster and it's happening right then and there. So I think it's important to consider those situations, because not only shit happens, but some people are assholes. And not only will they initiate force against you, but they'll be unrepentant and they'll refuse to make you whole. And even in the case of insurance, like let's say my window was insured and the insurance company is the one that comes after you to get their money back from the window that they just fixed for me. It's the same thing, and I don't really have an easy solution for how to handle those cases. And it's funny because in that book that I mentioned before on this channel, Sicitur ad Astra, Andrew J. Galambos, he kind of hints at it, but he doesn't really give he basically says it's important to make it more profitable to be honorable and less profitable to be dishonorable. And I'll remind you that profit isn't just measured in terms of finance or money. Profit is a morally acquired increase in your happiness. So basically, if being honorable leads to a happier life and being dishonorable leads to a less happy life, then people will just be honorable, except for the crazy ones, which can happen too. And then he says, for more on that, take this other course. And he's done a pretty good job of keeping his stuff offline. So I don't really know. Like, it's not obvious how to get money to pay for my window from an unrepentant douchebag who threw a brick through my window. One thing is for sure, though, I know what not to do, and what not to do is to put shiny pieces of metal on people and give them the moral right to run roughshod over people with a manual in their pocket and say, hey, this manual says I can kick the shit out of you. Because then, over time, that leads to situations like this girl being yanked out of her chair in a high school for refusing to leave because the teacher wanted to kick her out for having her cell phone out, basically. And that would fail the moral test anyway, because actually I'm not too sure I was going with that, but basically it's a challenge that I've been posed many times and I don't have a clear-cut answer, and I think it's important to throw it out there and just acknowledge that I know it's a challenge, but the fact that I don't have a clear-cut answer to that situation, basically how to deal with douchebags after the fact and get retribution for the damage that they've done to you, doesn't make it acceptable to to have a system where a small group of people can initiate force with impunity on everyone else and hide their behavior behind fancy language and stuff like that. And if you have solutions or strategies to employ with that, please leave comments under this, because it's a really important situation to consider. And you know, shit happens and some people are jerks, and that's why we can't have a monopoly on force to a small group of people, because the smart ones will end up in that group and then just run roughshod over everyone else. And I've alluded to that in my video on how there's no configuration of good or bad people that can make having a state necessary. Link under this as well. So actually, I'll put the aftershave off camera. I'll put the aftershave on off camera. So thank you very much for watching this video. Please like and share, and leave comments again under this video if there's anything you'd like to add to this conversation. And you can find links to my Twitter and Tumblr and all that great stuff under here. Please subscribe to my YouTube channel, and I will see you soon as I produce more content, because again, even when I don't shave for a week, I have a reasonable amount of opportunities in a week to film a video in the car, and now with a proper mount for my phone, I will be able to do so in a higher quality way. So thank you very much again. I will see you soon. You take care. Later.